Right, Hey, folks, welcome to the Camp Constitution Report with your host, Hal Shurtleff. This report is sponsored by Camp Constitution, which, among other things, runs a week-long family camp. And next year's camp is from July 12th to the 17th, and it's going to be a specialty theme, our 250th anniversary of our nation. And we've already got applications coming in. We also have a number of events year-round. We're hosting a tour of the Forefathers Monument in Plymouth, Massachusetts, October 11th, just coming up in a few weeks. So to learn more about us and to sign up for our events, go to our website, campconstitution.net. And also, you're going to be watching this program. It's either on YouTube or Rumble or on, we have about maybe a half a dozen other platforms. So please subscribe and share this information. And I like to say we have a special guest, but all of our guests are special. But this week, well, I want a little background. There was an organization that ranked conservative podcasts like dealing with the Constitution, and they have something listed fifth out of 15. And so that's opened up some doors for us where we get people from different organizations asking to have their people that they work with speak. So I'm very excited that we're to have a guest like Adam Swart, and he's the founder of Crowds on Demand. And you see his website right in front of you. So, Adam, can you, instead of me reading this biographical sketch, why don't you do it yourself? I think it works better.
Yeah, my pleasure, Hal. Thanks so much for being on. I'm really constitutionalist myself, so I love this document. I love the fact that we've actually been running our country on the basis of this Constitution for as long as we have. I mean, it's a truly amazing thing. There's not a country in the world that can really say that. So it's a beautiful thing. About a little bit about me. I'm the CEO and founder of Crowds on Demand. We are the largest protest company in the country. As you can imagine, that attracts with it some degree of publicity, not always positive, which that's okay. That's okay. I love the First Amendment. But one of the reasons I like to go on these types of programs is to discuss the idea of compensating activists, discuss the effectiveness that it can have, and discuss the ethics around it and why, people should be compensated for, voicing their opinions. And also kind of making it clear to everybody that when they see kind of stuff that's illegal, that's not us, right? Crowds on Demand is engaged in peaceful, legal kind of activity. So that's why I'm here today to discuss, protesting, pay what we do and kind of the broader issues of protecting the Constitution in this country, in this very polarized time when it feels like there are forces on the left and the right that are really not respecting the Constitution, in my opinion.
Well, it's interesting. Back during the George Floyd riots, Chris Como at the time was working for CNN, and he was talking to one of his, I think it was Don Lemon, and he said, "When do protests said they have? Where does it say protests have to be peaceful?" Well, Chris, it says in the First Amendment that you have a right to petition, but for peaceful, not violent. Um, do you have any competition? Are there any other organizations that do what you do?
Well, not no, we don't, and I'll tell you this, and the answer is no, we don't, and yes, we do. The people who are our competition work in the shadows. They don't advertise what they do. I suspect that they engage in illegal activity, in many cases unethical activity, because so there's a reason. There are people who are our competitors. I just don't completely know who they are because they're in the shadows and they don't want you to know who they are, right? What we're doing is providing more of a publicity service, right, than some sort of manipulative type program. And that's why I'm on these programs. You're not going to see my competition out there because they're engaged in probably illegal activities.
Illegal
So they're
activities.
not
Yeah.
going to want you to know anything about them.
Yeah, over the years, I've been at events. I've been at events, and sometimes I'm protesting, and it's always peaceful. We don't even want to engage in name calling. Will have signs.
Yeah.
Back in, I think it was in when I first learned about the Chinese Communist flag being raised in Boston City Hall Plaza. I had the Falun Gong friends with me. They do a good job. They don't need any paid
Is
advertising.
that true? They put the
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Chinese
Oh yeah.
flag
Yeah.
on,
Well,
and for what purpose?
Well, they were celebrating the Communist Revolution of China,
In
and it was
Boston City
in
Hall?
Boston. Yeah, yeah,
No
yeah.
way. No
Oh,
way.
yes,
There's
way.
no
Oh,
way.
yeah. Well, if you look up, we had a case against the city of Boston called Shurtleff v. Boston and the Christian flag, and they denied me the permit. It took 5 years, almost 5 years, and a 9-0 Supreme Court decision, but we U.S. Supreme Court. But the Falun Gong people do a great job of bringing awareness to things. I don't know if they've ever worked with you or not. Um,
Yeah, they're actually and they're a very well funded organization. They publish the Epoch Times.
Epoch Times, that's correct. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So this is a very well-funded organization who is I don't know the details of everything in their movement, so I don't mean to endorse everything that they say, but
right.
they they do shine a light on the abuses of the communist government, and their rights should be protected. And at minimum, I think that uh, that I, the idea of displaying a foreign country's flag, who's not an ally of the United States, in our city hall. I mean, if you go to Shenzhen City Hall in China, they're not going to display an American flag. I would
No,
think.
it
I
won't be
mean,
happening.
I wouldn't think so. I don't know, but I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, let's say I was having an event in downtown Boston to promote a certain thing, and I come to you. I'd say, well, I'd like to get maybe 100 people out, and
Yeah.
we're holding Constitution Day, and we're going to be raising the flag to honor the Constitution on September 17th. So, what might things you may advise me? Say, well, my budget is, say, it's 5,000 or 10,000. What could you do for me?
Well, sure. Well, the number one thing that we would do is try to identify, well, what are you looking to accomplish with what you're doing? Right. So you're looking to raise awareness about the Constitution on kind of an important date, right? You want people who are passionate about the Constitution, probably a diverse set of people who are constitutionalists, and that could be conservatives or non-conservatives. Um, and so first of all is identifying what you're trying to create with
Right,
the day, right? So what is the objective? Also, is it to get media attention? Is it to get social media attention? Is it to make a point in front of the people you're demonstrating against, right? Are you trying to make a broader point? So the first thing you have to do is understand your objectives.
hmm
Um, one of the things I think a lot of people do very poorly, and I'm going to take you on a little tangent before answering your question, is a lot of people don't fully understand what their objectives are, and they don't understand who they're protesting or who they're rallying for. So they spend a lot of time and money and to little effect, right? So for example, I always see these people out LA outside LA City Hall, demonstrating against Donald Trump. Well, I'm like, well, LA City Council, I think, is 100%, or maybe I think there's one Republican on there, right? Out of like 18 or something. So, like, why are you demonstrating about Donald Trump in front of the LA City Council? Number one. And number two, what is the LA City Council going to do about Donald Trump, right?
That's
Like,
right.
I would think if you were going to demonstrate about Trump and you wanted to do it in California, you'd focus on Republican members of Congress, right, who might be aligned with Trump and say, okay, well, we want you guys to understand that, what Trump is doing is wrong or whatever. But the number one thing people do is they don't understand who they're protesting, and they don't. So that's number one. And number two, they don't understand what is their goal out of a protest, right? Every protest should have some sort of objective, right? A short-term goal, medium term, and long term, right? So short
Yeah,
term might
it would seem like a waste of time to spend time in front of the LA City Hall denouncing
that's my
Donald
point.
Trump. Um, what I've been seeing a lot is that the Congress, mostly Republican congressmen, giving town halls, and you'll see
Yeah.
a lot of people showing up. Generally speaking, the only people that come to these town halls are those who might like the person, or they're looking for a particular. Well, hey, we want you to pass this bill HR 253. But by and large, they go, not many people. All of a sudden, people are showing up and in so-called red areas. And oh my goodness, there's a groundswell. It looks like there's all kinds of people out against the current Republican administration and those who support it. but I think it's a little. I don't know. It's quite accurate because these people get elected by 65%, 70% margin in these districts. I can't believe that all those people all of a sudden turned. So
Both can
do
be
you?
true. Both can be true.
Yeah,
You have, I mean, both can be true. Number one, yeah, you might have people who come in from other districts, right? But number two, you could be elected. You said 65%, right? That means 35% are opposed, right? You could have the
that's true. Yeah,
35%, a
that's
lot
true.
of
Yeah,
people within the 35% opposed. So one thing that I think how that people make a mistake in understanding protests is they understand it as a plebiscite instead of as a publicity strategy, right? An awareness strategy. So the idea is, okay, so let's just say you have a town hall meeting, right? And you have 300 people, sorry, who are show up on one side of an issue and 50 people on the other side of the issue. Does that mean that your constituents are 6-1 in favor of the issue? No, it doesn't. But I think
yeah.
a lot of people foolishly believe that it does, and that creates this illusion that, okay, well then because the people who show up to these meetings are a subset of society, right, and not necessarily reflective of the broader view. So you could well have a case where you have a lot of people from your opposition who are showing up, but they might not represent the broader sentiment. I mean, Nixon would always talk about the silent majority, right? That
Right. Yeah.
silent majority of people, if you're happy with your person in office, you probably aren't going to show up to the town hall. It's the people who are unhappy who are going to show up.
Now, I noticed in the little list of so-called talking points, you said that protests since Trump's been reelected or since he's come into office are up 400%.
Mhm.
That's quite a lot.
It's a big number. Well, yeah, I mean, and the specifics is that requests in some cities are up by that factor. That's the specific
Yeah.
message is that yes, we've gotten requests. Now that does not translate to bookings in our case,
Right.
but in all cases, sometimes it does, but more often than not, a lot of the requests are ones that we don't necessarily want to take on. And I'll tell you why. We're in the business of persuasion. We're in the business of publicity, right? What I like to do is create awareness and persuade people. So we work with the left and we work with the right, but I like to focus on cases what I think of as common sense values, right? You're from New England. You guys kind of understand common sense. I mean, you guys have New England has common sense liberals and common sense conservatives, and of course, people who aren't common sense. But there's this idea, we'll talk about that in a bit, but there are a lot of leaders that you guys have had in your part of the country that are common sense regardless of the side, and so I don't think people always ask me, well, is it hypocritical to take on both sides? No, we won't take on both sides of the same issue,
Right.
but sometimes the liberal position should be advanced, such as I believe that people should get access to healthcare regardless of their economic status, and even if you're poor and destitute, and, even if there's other issues, you should not be denied healthcare because you can't afford it, right? And that's a liberal position. Right. And conversely, I think that the police need to be well funded. The defund the police makes no sense and it should be opposed and ridiculed at every turn, right?
Mhm.
So does that make me hypocritical? Because I think people should. I actually think that's very cohesive. I think we should have a healthy society and a lawful society, right? So we advance causes that are common sense, right? And it's not to say I have to agree with it 100% to advance it, but I have to at least think it's a common sense
Sure.
value. But yeah, we get
Now,
we get
now, do you make that decision, or does your staff kind of okay? What should we take this one on? How does it work, or is
yeah.
it just
So
you have some standards that you just no way we're going to work with these people?
I have standards, but I also typically have one or two people that I'll run things by if I'm. I mean, there's some times where it's unquestionably we're not going to take it, and there are other times where I'll run it by some people and say, hey, do you think this deserves to be taken on? Right? And so I don't have to agree with it 100%, but if I think there's merit to something, a great argument, a great example is the cryptocurrency industry.
Hmm.
Um, we've been working with the cryptocurrency industry for about 8 years now, maybe 7, 8 years. And at first, it was not a subject that I was 100% in favor of, and I still am not like one of those people who says crypto should be allowed to run free. But it was, especially when we started working with that industry, was a field that did not was not being advocated for. All the lobbyists and the lawyers were on the side of the big banks who were resisting it, and I
Hmm.
felt that even though I wasn't 100% pro crypto, I felt that cryptocurrency deserved to its day in the public square. Um, and so that's what we did. So think about, if you're a lawyer, you don't have to love your clients, but you have to believe that they have some sort of case, right? Otherwise, you
Because
wouldn't.
there are some lawyers that will not take. I had a lawyer friend in Long Island, and the principal, which he didn't care for the principal. He got charged with some kind of sexual crime, and he
Oh,
said, "I'm not taking a case at all." And although he'll definitely find he like I said, I believe you should have a legal counsel. It just won't be
course.
me.
Right,
Yeah,
and that's exactly, and there's so, and that's exactly how I feel in about a lot of cases. It's like, hey, if there's plenty of other people who will help you advance your cause, but if I just can't advance it, like I feel exactly how your friend feels in regards to
yeah.
certain causes where I don't in any way deny them the right to express themselves as long as they're doing it peacefully. Um, so yeah, that's how I feel. So yeah, we get a lot of requests, um and I'm fortunate enough though to be selective. I'll admit, when I started this business, so I've been in this business for 13 years. I'm 34 now. I started this
Oh,
business in college.
yeah.
So when I would take on everybody more or less, as long as you weren't like the KKK or something, or like super hateful, we would more or less take your business. Because frankly, if you're starting a business, that's sort of the only way to start a business, is you take on any client. You can't be selective initially.
Hmm.
But as we developed the business, I really felt like, hey, I'm fortunate enough to be, well enough to be able to not just take on everything, and to take on the causes that I think are passionate.
Yeah, one of the things I got from your email was that you're concerned about a lot of these protests and foreign money coming in, and these
Yeah.
protests are not designed to be peaceful, but actually violent. And we've seen that, especially with the Gaza, the pro-Palestinian protests.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things on that. Number one, I think it's very important to distinguish the right of each individual protester to protest versus the fact that you could be a peaceful protester, and there could be someone else who's committing violence or
That's
committing
right. Yeah.
vandalism, and you should not be held accountable for that other person's actions, right? So in the sense of, you're using the Palestine example, and to be sure, there were people who committed illegal activity in furtherance of, or what they say is furtherance of those goals, and that should be punished. But my reluctance is, I refuse to label all the Palestinian movement as violent just because there were elements in that movement
Right.
that were right. Like, you have the right to be boneheaded, and by the way, you should have the right to chant from the river to the sea without being expelled from school, right? You should have the right to chant even kind of racist slogans without being expelled, in my opinion, as a First Amendment advocate. You should have the right to be offensive, because the only way that you know that we have a First Amendment is the idea that you're judged based on actions, not based on speech.
Well,
Um,
yeah, unpopular speech isn't necessarily unconstitutional. I mean, isn't
Absolutely
unconstitutional,
right.
I should say. In
So
fact,
violence,
yeah.
vandalism, law breaking, that's a different subject that you got to be punished. But it doesn't matter if you're doing that in furtherance of a cause that you 100% agree with, right?
Yeah.
If you say, I'm a First Amendment guy, and if somebody says I'm doing a pro First Amendment protest, but we're going to burn down a building, I would say, no, that's unacceptable. It
That's
doesn't matter
unacceptable. Yeah.
what the cause is. You're not. We in America are so fortunate that we live in a country where we have the right to advocate for our views peacefully, So we have no excuse to advocate violently. Like there are people in repressive regimes where, you know, you actually don't have the right to advocate peacefully for your views. In America, we do have the right to peacefully advocate. So we should, it's absurd to advocate violently when you have the ability to do so peacefully and effectively.
Yeah, I think violence I don't think it helps a person's cause. In fact,
No.
I was at a Get Us Out of the United Nations. And I don't really, I always call the things I organize as educational outreach. We're trying
Yep.
to educate. We always had printed materials to hand out, and somebody showed up with a UN flag and wanted to burn it. I said, look, burning something, whether you like it or not, just leaves people a bad taste in most people's
Yes.
mouth. I said, if you set a UN flag on fire, I'm probably not going to run for a fire extinguisher too quickly, But actually, and there's also hazards too.
It's
You light a
hazardous.
fire,
And
and
you
yeah,
don't know what could happen. It's the same thing I feel about blocking off streets without a permit. By the way, it's illegal, but you're putting the motorists at risk, you're
that's right.
putting protesters at risk, and you're putting whoever relies on that road for emergency services at risk, right? If you want to block off a street because you have such a large event, then get a permit for
Get a
it.
permit.
Right?
Yeah, yeah,
Or, but we have the right without a permit to demonstrate on sidewalks, right? And so we have the complete rights to do all of those things. So I think it's, in my mind, absurd that people engage in all these other forms of what they call a protest. I call a riot. If an
right.
illegal
Yeah.
protest is a riot. A protest that that burns stuff, that creates public hazards is a riot, right? It should not be called a protest.
And unfortunately, sometimes, like you said, you could have legitimate group of people that are making a point, and there's a couple of people that join that protest with the
Yes.
purpose of committing violence, and most of the people there, hey, we just want to hold up sign that says "No king, no kings,"
Yeah, that's
and that's one
right.
of the protests, the anti-Trump protest. And we see them. I live in New Hampshire. I'm from Boston, but up in New Hampshire, and I live in a relatively conservative area. And I just drive by them. I don't, I don't even believe in making any people come by and make, honk the horn and give the thumbs down. I just, wave to them. Hey, look, you got a right to do that.
Yeah,
Uh,
they should.
I counter with, we were in a parade, the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Lexington, this past April. And 2 weeks prior, I got an email from this No Kings group in Lexington, asked me if we would hold signs, No Kings, since you support the Constitution and I said, well, if the sign said, because the whole thing was no king but King Jesus, that was the battle cry back then. I said, if you give me one of those signs, I'll be glad to put it up. And that was the last I heard from them.
Oh, that's funny.
So
Yeah, there you
yeah,
go.
but they were
Well,
at the
yeah,
parade, and they didn't cause any no trouble. They held their signs, and that's fine. They respected us, and in fact, we got applaud. So, do they really know what we stand for? They're applauding us. This is Lexington, right?
yeah, well,
So,
and that's really the thing is that peaceful expression should be not only accepted, but it should be celebrated, especially when it's respectful. When it's not respectful, it doesn't have to be celebrated, but it still has to be facilitated, right?
that's
So,
right.
for example, the idea of like, okay, I mean, no king, I mean, that's a separate matter, but if you're even if you're talking about the right of like a neo-Nazi or Ku Klux Klan group to demonstrate, right? That doesn't have to be celebrated, but it does have to be facilitated, right? Um, and those groups are it's they're it's not because we want to hear from them, but it's because the idea, so I'm sure you agree with me that what the Attorney General said about hate speech was incorrect. The idea that there's a classification, there's free speech, and then there's hate speech. There's free speech, and then there is illegal forms of expression. I think she
Yeah,
misspoke when she said that. I think if she wanted to restate her remarks, she could have said there is free speech, and then there are illegal forms of expression, such as rioting, burning buildings, vandalizing, violence. That doesn't count as free speech. I agree with that. But hate speech, you should be able to say the most vitriolic, horrible things because what I consider a horrible thing, you may not consider a horrible
That's
thing. That
correct.
was
Yeah.
it's the inherent subjectivity that is why that we have these standards because we don't want to be like England where somebody who says something boneheaded can get
Gets
a
arrested. Yeah.
right. And it's funny because um the right has actually been the one that's been most vocal about this issue. There was a gentleman, a comedy writer who was recently arrested in Britain for some
That's right.
remarks on Twitter that, by the way, I completely disagree with and would disassociate with. I thought they were hateful toward the transgender people, but he should have the right to say them, right? That's his right. And he was arrested for incitement to violence, right?
Mhm.
And what's crazy is the British police don't even have to prove that someone was hurt because of your remarks. They don't even have to prove that. They just have to say that the remarks are hurtful to some. But what's funny about this whole thing, Hal, is that the left, many leftists have been also arrested. Environmental activists have been arrested on this behalf. For example, people saying, "Oh, we should block off the roadways." Not I will block off the roadway, but
Right.
we should block off the roadways because the cars are really polluting, right? Some a statement like we should block off the roadways because the cars are destroying the planet. That's also under their laws. That's incitement, right? That's crazy, right? If you
Right.
block off the roadways, yes, you should be put in jail. But saying, expressing your support for the the idea of it, no, that's speech. So
Well, it's
it's
interesting you brought that up. Some years ago, I was hosting a program that was being taped by C-SPAN, and during the Q&A session, which, by the way, I never recommend because you never know what you're going to get. A well-intentioned person of retired military got up and he made some comments about Clinton and didn't ask a question, and then he suggested somebody shoot him.
oh
I thought,
Lord.
oh no, I aged 20. I can feel my hair turning gray. I got a call from the Secret Service a few days later. They were very polite, asked me about him. And I said, did he do it? He said, no, because he suggested. If he said that I
Yes,
will do that, that's a crime.
that's
To
different.
suggest, although we took action, you're not coming to any more events,
No,
which
I
is
did.
our right to do that. But I
Well,
want to
yeah,
get on the
and
subject. I'd like to get on the subject of hate speech.
yes.
Um, I define it as a conservative. Hate speech is speech that liberals hate. But then
Ah,
it goes beyond that. It's not just hate, but my hate speech is violence.
yes.
So if I say that a certain group of people, a certain behavior I think is wrong or sinful, that's not just hate speech, that's violence. When I'm just
Yes.
expressing my view, I'm trying to convince people and what I believe is true. And that to me is a very dangerous trend because not only will I be shut off, but I could be subject to arrest. I mean, it's not happening now, but that's down the road. But also, it's okay to come after me physically because of what I said is
Yes.
violence. Then you
Yes.
should be able to have violence against me. That's a real
Right.
serious problem.
Oh, I could not agree more with the way you describe it is exactly my concerns with it too, which is the concept that there's some words that are so horrible that they allow for a violent response to words, right?
Yeah,
The response to words is words, and moreover, I do believe that hate speech could lead to societal banishment of sorts, right? I mean, the
right,
you could call it cancel culture in a way, but I think when something is so beyond the pale, I understand saying, hey, I don't want someone who works for me to have this view, right?
right.
Because it's scary. So, for example, expressing support for what happened in Utah to Mr.
Charlie
Kirk,
Kirk.
right? Expressing support for that, right? I wouldn't want someone who works for me to support what happened, right? So, do I think that that's illegal? No, it shouldn't be illegal to express that, but it should be. I don't want somebody who works for me to be in support of Luigi Mangione, right?
That's right.
Like you, it should be legal to be in support of him, but I don't want someone who works for me to have that view because it means that they don't believe in peaceful expression, which troubles me, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but when where it's interesting, Hal, and I like the idea of unpacking this is, okay, so we both kind of agree we don't want someone who has those views, but where does that get into cancel culture, right? Because cancel culture is this idea of saying, okay, there's a professor who said, I don't agree with the tactics of Black Lives Matter. He didn't. I mean, there were people who were fired literally for saying, I don't agree with the tactics of Black Lives
Oh,
Matter.
there was people that said all lives matter. I think it was a teacher, a lady, and she was
Yeah.
fired for saying
Yeah.
all lives matter. So
Yeah, I mean, so
yeah.
all of these there was like a purge of people who were fired for that. And that to me seems like cancel culture,
Mhm.
not we don't want hate speech. But where does that line, where is that line? And not because that is kind of a subjective line because for some people, that would be tantamount to hate speech, but hate speech is inherently it gets into subjective
Subjective.
territory.
Exactly. Yeah,
And I
exactly.
guess it's up to the employer to decide that, right? So for some employers, they would say someone who says all lives matter is someone who I don't want working for me because I feel that they're not committed to ending racism in this country, right? I
Hmm.
guess that's what they would say. I don't associate with that point of view, but that's
Right.
what someone would say. And I suppose they should have the right to have who they want working for them. And you and I can just say they're wrong.
And a lot of times people get fired, they end up getting a job that's or starting their own business, which is much better.
Yeah,
So it was almost a blessing, you know. It
I
happened to
hope
me.
so.
Yeah. So let me ask you, can you, if I asked you some of your more recent client, can you discuss that? Some of your more
Yeah, I
recent
can
clients?
to some extent. Yeah. I tend to. What's interesting is I like to talk about things that are a little bit further ago, so it's not an ongoing issue.
Sure. Oh
For
yeah.
example, so if you want to know one of the campaigns I'm most proud of, it's called hashtag Delete Facebook. It was one that I think liberals, conservatives, non-political people can all agree social media is a scourge on this planet, right? And Facebook this was a movement right after sort of the 2016 election when it came out that Facebook was really using data and selling users data to divide Americans against each other, right?
Hmm.
Against one another, right? And they were selling information, and even abroad, that Facebook, the platform, was used to lead to a genocide in Myanmar, right? So there were people, my understanding were they were people who've actually made a lot of money on Facebook, but they had been so upset with what they had created, the monster that they created, that they funded this movement, that they wanted to fund this movement to kind of um, shine a light on what Facebook was doing. And it was so successful, our movement, that they changed their name. They don't call themselves Facebook anymore. They
You
call
know,
themselves.
I remember that campaign. I remember when people would I had a lot of email, a lot of people would say 3 days from now I'm off for good,
Yeah,
and they're
and
mostly conservatives. You know, my friends would be mostly
And
conservative.
many liberals then, so it was interesting because we really ran it as a bipartisan because conservatives never liked Facebook. It's Silicon Valley, Zuckerberg was thought to be this sort of liberal, but conversely, that liberals don't like Facebook because there was this feeling that the Russians and Trump had,
Right.
manipulated it. So both sides really didn't like it. And the thing is, Facebook doesn't really care. They're not liberal or conservative. They'll use whatever grievances people have against each other. But the great thing that we got from all of this was, in addition to them changing their name, which is semantic, they also drastically made it harder to do political advertisements on their platforms,
Oh,
right?
really? Yeah.
So so I'm again, I still think they're a very flawed platform, Facebook and Instagram, but progress in the right direction. And that was from protesting outside headquarters, outside, Zuckerberg's estate, outside the Congress and everything like that,
Oh, wow.
among a broader kind of online campaign. So this is the kind of thing that we can do. And I really think social media is just evil. So I would love to do more of that type of thing.
Well, because you're sort of an old school. I mean, with actually going, holding up signs and
Yeah.
protesting in that regard. That's sort of, and I tell you, it's there's nothing like the written word. All the MP3s and MP4s and PDFs and all the way to get the word out, but nothing like a good book or a pamphlet. I still
I
think,
think so.
or a sign. A hard copy sign is strategically located somewhere.
I completely agree. And the reason is because people are so used to online that you can just filter out online.
Yeah,
Whereas you actually meet someone in person, it's harder to hate them. Especially the way that Crowds on Demand does it is we have really respectful people who are legitimately passionate about the issue and who are focused on convincing people, right? And you're not going to
right.
convince everybody,
No, no.
but you're going to convince some people if you're respectful and kind. And if someone else yells at you, I always train my people. If someone else yells at you and they're disrespectful, film it. Let their own words speak for
Yeah,
themselves.
let
Don't
them.
stoop
Yeah,
to their level.
that's
You
right.
know,
Yeah,
film it, publish it, let them their words, but be respectful. And that's actually something you can learn from Charlie Kirk, actually. And I'll admit I'm a little old to be in his demographic, so I wasn't as familiar with his debating style as I could have been, but I've been watching his videos and he was always very respectful, even when people
it
would come
was.
for him. And I actually think that was what allowed him to persuade a lot of people. If he and believe me, like sometimes there's some overweight, blue-haired girl, right? Like it'd have been easy for him to strike a cheap
Yeah,
shot, make
yeah.
fun of her appearance, but that wouldn't have convinced her. That would have probably only made people be like, "Wow, this guy is an you know
A
what, like
jerk.
yeah,
Yeah,
jerk,
yeah.
right?" But instead, he's like, "Okay, let's unpack what you're trying to say, and let me try to convince you." And even if he didn't convince that person, he would might convince other people, right? And I don't agree with all of his views at all. So, but I mean, just purely
Well,
tactically.
over the years that's been in my debating people, I never expect the person debating to say, "Oh, gee, you're right, Hal. I'm wrong. Sorry."
Yeah,
But you're talking to people around you, and you've got them listening, and I think that's
yeah.
the impact. And I always just when someone starts getting angry and using profanity, then get to ad hominem of personal attack.
They've
That's when
lost
you've won the
already.
debate. You've won the
Yeah,
debate. Yeah, yeah.
there's an old lawyer's saying is if you have the facts on your side, use the facts. If you have the law
Facts.
on your side, use the law. If you don't have law or the facts, just bang the table.
But,
You
oh
know,
yeah, pound. Yeah, yeah. That's right. Pound the table.
yeah. And
All
that's
right.
really
Well,
what it is.
we get a few minutes left. Where can people, if they're interested in reaching out to you? Of course, the website I just had a second ago, so they can go to your website. Let's see, here it is. It is crowds on,
Crowdsondemand.com.
yeah, protest rallies and advocacy. They can contact you, and also if they'd like to interview and you're watching this program or listening to it, they want to reach out. They can go right. I guess you go right to you and to contact you, and I'm sure you'd be amenable to get on.
Of course,
So,
I love to go on every show because I just like to evangelize my message of free speech and what we do, and that's kind of why I do a decent bit of media is for that reason, so that people kind of hear what we're doing and maybe have a better understanding of it.
well, Adam, if you're are you based in Los Angeles?
I split my time between a few places on the West Coast, but yeah. Um,
Okay.
But if I'm ever out in New England, we have to meet. We do a lot of we do a lot of work out in Boston actually from time to time. So there's a lot to be done. The mayor his policies are not what I agree with. I would put it that way. She's kind of a whack job, unfortunately.
Well, I think you have a lot of agreement with me. I moved out of Boston 5 years ago, and and she lived about a mile down the road from me. But I'm glad I'm no longer there. But yeah, we'll also be honored to give you a tour of the area. We have a place in Lexington. We'll give you a tour of the Battle Green and all that. So yeah, let's stay in touch. You work
Absolutely.
through Kristen Davis. You have my contact information. That'd be great.
You
All right,
got
folks. Well, you've been listening to the Camp Constitution Report with your host Hal Shurtleff. And until next time, may God richly bless you.